Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name's Peter Nattrass, and I am the Manager of Future Industries within the South Australian Government's Department for Energy and Mining. And it's great that you're able to join us today for this event, which is the first in a series of webinars that we'll be looking to deliver as a part of our electric vehicle fleet pledge. Firstly, I'd like to provide an acknowledgement to country. So, as guests on Aboriginal land, we acknowledge everything that our department does impacts on Aboriginal country, the sea, the sky, its people, and the spiritual and cultural connections which have existed since the first sunrise. Our responsibility is to share our collective knowledge, recognise a difficult history, respect the relationships made over time, and create a stronger future. We are ready to walk, learn, and work together. So what is the Electric Fleet Pledge? And that's, an important part of our discussion today is, together we're seeking to create a network of like-minded organisations and individuals that share a commitment or future interest to integrate electric vehicles into their fleets as cost-effective and fit-for-purpose models become available. Now, for many of us, EVs will present new challenges, such as what role will workplace charging play compared to public charging to meet the operational needs of your business or your workplace. And it will throw up questions like, what options do I have as a tenant or owner to install electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and how might I get my landlord to contribute to some of those costs? So the Fleet Pledge seeks to create a safe space where we can come together to share our knowledge and experiences so that it's a less daunting task, for us all to have on our to-do list. So today I'd like to thank our guests. We have Mark Borlase from the RAA, and we have Mark Gregory from Flinders University for being here with us. And I'd like to acknowledge our founding EV Pledge partners and other pledgees who have also joined us today online. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers with our speakers at the end of the panel session. So I'd encourage you to put your questions into the chat. We might not get to all of those questions, but we'll certainly undertake to get back to you. I'd strongly encourage you to head over to the EV Fleet Pledge website to enter your details to sign up to the Fleet Pledge. So importantly, there's a soft entry into this. It's informal, and our objective is to support you so your organisation builds the confidence up to move through the more formal recognition framework. So now I'd like to hand over to our host, Rebecca Tracy. And Rebecca is an experienced journalist and news producer, and we're very lucky to have her on our team here at the Department for Energy and Mining. So thank you, Beck.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome here today. I think we're lucky for our first in the driver's seat to have the two Marks with us. And as Pete just said, the reason for the session today is to ease you into understanding what Fleet Pledge is and how you can learn and join. And as Pete said, to find out more about Fleet Pledge, you can go to evfleetpledge.sa.gov.au and join the conversation. That was another thing that I was going to reiterate as well. Anything we haven't covered today, as Peter said, we will put up on the website afterwards, and this recording will go up there as well, so you can have a look. So joining us, the two Marks, Mark Borlase from the RAA, Mark Gregory from Flinders University. So to get started, I thought I'd ask you both a big question. What do you see as the biggest challenge for organisations who are seeking to transition their fleets to electric vehicles now and in the next 10 years?
Sorry, we can start. I suppose it really comes back to operational needs. So if your business relies on passenger vehicles as the fleet, that's probably easier to do. You've only then got to worry about range if your business has, salesmen or reps or whatever going out into the country. It's more complex if you're a mixed fleet. That is, you've got vans and light vehicles and heavy vehicles, because they're all at various stages of market development. So as I said, passenger cars are becoming more mature. You're starting to get a range of vehicle sizes in there. If you look at the RAA, just ourselves, half of our fleet, we've got over 200 vehicles, but half of our fleets are vans, which is good, but we've got functional needs, like we need them actually be small enough to fit into a car park to attend vehicles that are broken down in car parks. So getting the functional requirements is the primary issue, I think, for a lot of fleets. And from then on, the operating costs / whole of life costs start to often work out for themselves. They'll help you with the business case, but as I said, if the vehicle's not fit for purpose, you effectively have got a problem right from the get-go. So we know that there's vans starting to come, and there's starting to become some light trucks. So that'll make it easier in the future for you to actually have to match that with the mixed needs of your business.
I'll just add a couple of things. That was good comprehensive answer. Few things. Right now, availability is a bit of a challenge, and especially for fit-for-purpose vehicles. At Flinders, we have about 120 vehicles, and we also have a range of some vans and trucks and buses, but a lot of passenger vehicles, thankfully. And we're about 20 vehicles now that we've got present, with several more on order. And there's a few other little things you'll have to pay attention to. One is, of course, the human element and people getting used to the differences in driving these vehicles. They're not so big that it takes very much, but just little behaviors like make sure you bring them back and charge them when we need to charge them. It's not always a natural thing. The other thing I would say is that you've got to make some decisions about how much of that infrastructure you want to build out, charging infrastructure, versus how much you want to rely on kind of, public or commercial charging options. In our case, we've decided to build out a lot of the infrastructure, so there's another little investment there.
Okay, thanks for your answers.
No worries.
So, Mark B, the RAA was awarded the statewide EV charging network project last year at the beginning of last year. Can you tell us a bit about that and about how the network will fit in with that the whole EV fleet?
Yeah, so since winning the grant, we've formed a dedicated team, obviously, to do the build. The Motoring Club's own ChargeFox, which is a national management group, and we've used some of their expertise to help us develop the plans for it. The big numbers, I suppose, is that effectively it'll be over 500 chargers throughout South Australia. They'll be at 140 locations, and I think it's only about 21 of those locations will be within the metropolitan area. So it's substantially a regional EV infrastructure project, and that is about getting rid of the range anxiety and the operational issues of not being able to access chargers once you get outside the city. There'll be about 54 of those 500 will be the very fast chargers. And that's really what's probably needed for businesses out there, because they don't want downtime of their staff staying around, slow chargers. There will be slower chargers, the 7 kilowatt ones, but they'll be in accommodation and shopping centres. So if you've got staff out there that overnighting, in whatever capacity their business is, then you've got a chance to do the overnight charge there as well. So they are being rolled out. The first one will go in next month, and I think there'll be a joint announcement of the Minister about how that's going to roll out. But we intend to have it done by the end of next year. That's the intention. So the devil's in the detail when you start doing these programs. It's not about, you can choose a town and then you've got to choose a site, and then the site has to have a whole lot of other attributes. It needs to feel safe 24/7. It needs to have some stuff to do around there, preferably like a roadhouse or a shopping centre. It's got to be able to connect to the existing electrical infrastructure without putting, too much load on that. And lastly, because these are very, quite expensive investments, we've got to find a landlord or land that we can have for a long while, because once we've committed that civil works to it, we're pretty well locked into that place. And at the same time, we're not the only show in town. there are other businesses, some of the large oil companies are now starting to do them. But what we do build will probably bring us up to close to best coverage of a state.
That was going to be my next question, was how do we sit in compared to other states in Australia?
Yeah, currently I think we're a little bit off the pace. If you look at New South Wales and the ACT, we're probably a bit ahead of Victoria. But those states aren't sitting on their hands either. They've got, New South Wales has offered a similar sort of package to what's happened in South Australia. And the last announcement, the feds have committed 150 million to have a look at what's happening in each of the states and then fill in the gaps that will occur. So there's obviously going to be gaps in Northern Territory and a lot of those really remote areas, and that's where the feds see themselves as having a role to make sure we've got a national grid.
So you mentioned very fast chargers. How long do they take to charge?
Well, the charge time is determined by the car. So one of the problems is when you put electrons, when you put power into a car, it comes with heat, and heat is something batteries don't like. And the manufacturers of the cars manage that heat from the cheapest, have air cooling or basic water cooling. And if you go through to the very expensive German brands, they've actually got an air conditioner for the battery. So that just says, give me all the power you want as fast as you want, we'll manage the heat here. So these chargers that we're putting in are 150 kilowatt and 200 kilowatt hour chargers, but most of the cars will limit their own intake of electrons to about 100 kilowatts anyway. So if you, sorry, this is a long answer, but if you've got an expensive Porsche, it could be 15 to 20 minutes. If you've got one of the cheaper ones, it could be 3/4 an hour. But what we're seeing is that cars don't pull up with a flat battery. Most of them are pulling up with about half charge still left, and they're more top-ups.
Yep.
So that becomes part of what Mark was saying about getting the behaviour and the cultural stuff right, so that they, just automatically plug it in, or intuitively know, I'll stop there because I can, a third charge will do me to get back, and then I can put it on back at the office or whatever.
Yeah, and if they forget across the state, there'll be spots all across the state, so you'll never have that range anxiety. Yeah.
Just a comment to add to all that. There's a lot of work being done on this. This is a huge part of what kind of the science of batteries is working on right now, is how fast can you charge them? And there are technologies that are 5 and 10 times what we have today that are maybe a decade away. So I think over time, you're going to see vehicles that can take charges in 5 and 10 minutes. It's, we're not going to see that this decade, but next decade that's coming.
Another alternative to charging on site, where there's some trials going on where the medium-sized trucks actually have cartridge batteries. So when they return to base, they actually pull these out, and they're half a ton of battery, and basically put a fully charged cartridge back in, and they go off, and then they charge these batteries in racks back at the fleet operation. So there's other ways of keeping that charging so that your downtime for fleets is kept to a minimum as well. So we're going to see a lot of innovation in that area.
Yep.
Wireless as well is on its way. At some point, just like your phone, when you put it on a wireless charging pad, you can have one under your parking spot. And, eventually that'll probably come around as well.
Oh, wow. It's really exciting, isn't it? Amazing. So how do you think Fleet Pledge will help with the wider community and their uptake of electric vehicles in the future?
Well, hopefully small businesses or even large businesses know they're not alone. They know that they can piggyback on the experience of, organisations like ours that are community-faced and community-minded, so that we can help with some of our learnings, and that we'll make mistakes as well, like any in the way we've made decisions about purchases and stuff like that. So part of the EV Pledge group is to try and share your knowledge, and also bring the knowledge of your own staff up, so that they act as sort of agents outside of the organisation when they're at barbecues or whatever, to make, get over what is probably still a bit mysterious to a lot of people. A lot of people still think EVs are only for rich people, and they're a bit esoteric, but we're starting to see these Chinese vehicles coming under $40,000 now, and they're starting to creep into the real people's budgets and real companies' budgets that want to have a go at this and see how it might work for them.
Great. So just a reminder, if you've got any questions, to put them in the Teams chat and we'll endeavour to answer them. Now, Mark, number 2. Tell us what Flinders is doing towards achieving net zero and around the EV space.
So we, going back to about 2019, we had a sustainability plan, and we decided we want to hit a net zero target. We talked about 2025. We got the electricity by 2020. We were able to get a contract going, and I think by 2021 we were 100% renewable electricity, buying from a wind farm and producing on-site solar to the tune of about 20% of our electricity. The challenge from here, of course, is a number of other sources of carbon emissions. You've got air travel is really big for a university, so we've got to get that one sorted out. And then you've got embodied carbon emissions in buildings and things like that. So we're sorting those things out. And by 2030, we want to be at a point where we've pretty much either solved or mitigated for those, or counterbalanced them with other benefits. But the EVs is a big strategy, part of that strategy, in electrifying the transportation, and we're well on our way on that, and that's been part of the plan. And to some extent, with COVID and some of the market disruptions, it's probably slowed us down a little bit, but I still think by 2030 we'll have to recapitalize all those vehicles anyway, and as long as the supply is there, we'll be able to transition our fleet entirely.
Fantastic. And you mentioned when we were talking before about the solar panels and the charging. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so we have a lot of solar on campus. To run a campus with 20% solar, it means we've got some really big spaces. We've got some covered parking areas that are hundreds of parking spots covered by solar, and we've got EV chargers along in those areas, so you're able to charge directly off that. And we've even got 2 fast chargers. We have a partnership with Engie, private company, and they've put in 2 fast chargers that you can, if you want to get a fast charge, you can use those. We've also got, I think now, circa 22 or 24 chargers on campus that are 11 or 22 kilowatt.
So Mark was talking about fast chargers and rapid chargers and charging to the vehicle, but you're trialing something else.
Yes.
Yep.
So we're also trialing vehicle to grid, and we're doing this in part with some state support, and in part on our own, and in part with some private sector support and contributions, and a lot of people volunteering ideas and thoughts. But we've got, I think it's 10 vehicles coming that we want to, in the short run, put onto a vehicle to grid charging scheme. The idea there is that when the vehicle's not in use, it's available to send the energy bidirectionally back into the grid or back into the campus. And now you think, okay, well, do you want to do that? And in most cases, for most businesses, your vehicles aren't going to be in use at all times. And in a lot of businesses like ours, the peak period, or the period that you don't have a lot of solar available, is 5 to 9 p.m. If you're familiar with the duck curve, that's the point where a lot of people are getting home, and there's demands in the energy system, and solar is naturally going down because the sun's going down. And at that point, we're parking our cars, and we can use the battery that's residual, the residual battery energy, to feed back into the campus, cover that time period. And then as it gets dark and there's nobody around, the demands are less. If we've got the wind blowing and the wind power, the wind farm tells us it's okay, we can then charge those cars. And if not, our last resort might be by morning to charge them to 100%, using traditional, grid electricity if we had to. So we want to play with that. We want to see what those time parameters are, and then share that information with others who want to do that.
So yeah, so that sounds like something that could be rolled out well beyond.
Oh yeah,
at some stage.
I think the applications. I mean, a university is the type of environment where you'd want to do this first and be a little bit of a living laboratory and figure out, and then share the information about how to do it. But think about school buses. Great example, right? School buses tend to drive during a particular time. If they're electrified school buses, then they can serve as grid batteries when they're not in use. And when is that? Happens to be right at the perfect time
In the
to
middle of the
feed the
day.
grid, right?
Yep,
You know,
yep.
so it can feed the grid when it needs to feed the grid.
And
So
lessen the load as well on the other way.
yeah, less and
Yeah.
load the other way, and you're effectively charging off cycle. So there's a lot of things like that. Certain types of trucking work like that. I also think though the real market for vehicle to grid will really be vehicle to home. So you got people going out buying battery systems, which is great for their solar, their solar panels and so on. But I think eventually, a modern car battery is 5 times as much as a Tesla Powerwall in terms of its storage capacity. So it's a perfect addition to your home, and you can kind of buffer and use that power. If it was green power that you've got in your car, then you've got green power that you can feed to your home as you need it. And and similar to what we're doing at the university, you don't want to wake up the next day and find it empty. So you're going to have to sort out kind of when the car wants to give up power and when it doesn't. And that's just software. It's pretty straightforward. But I suspect that will be the big market for this, is that people will use their car to support their home.
Yeah, and a lot of people are already talking about that, aren't they?
Yeah.
Okay, got a couple of questions that come through. First one's for you. With the speed of the EV transition, have you reevaluated the number of chargers and charging speed that you'll need?
No, we think what we're putting in will cater for the known growth of EV. So if you just look at what's happening nationally, last year there was about 33,000 EVs sold. That brought the whole national fleet to about 70,000. The forecast for this year alone will be 70,000.
Wow. Yep.
So that'll mean about 125,000 vehicles on the road. Put that in context, that's still in a fleet of 20 million cars on the road. So it's a lot, but it's still not a lot compared to all the cars. So we'll have the ability, once we start to see the rollout, of what the usage is and the data that's starting to flow from it. And as Mark said before, currently the market is supply constrained. So there probably would have been a lot more sales if they could get those vehicles. What we're going to see is that supply will get better. And if you look at domestic purchases and all that sort of stuff, once the Chinese well and truly get here, they will give Tesla a run for their money. And because Tesla are just outselling everybody by multiple, they've really got the market to themselves right now. One of the inhibitors for a lot of people, maybe even for businesses, is, yeah, but how long is the battery going to last? Am I going to, have something in 10 years that's worth nothing? The durability of these batteries is better than what was forecast. If you look back to very old technology, Priuses that used nickel metal hydride batteries, still got them running around 20 years later. So we think that the companies need not to worry about so much that they're going to have a battery degrade on them. And batteries are actually in EVs are only deemed to be starting to get to their end of life when they've got 80%, will only charge to around 70–80% of their capacity because the range comes down. But what we're starting to see is those batteries now are being taken out. And as Mark said, there are multiples of size of the house batteries and then being used for other applications like house batteries or like support for your business after hours. And if you look what Mitsubishi are doing at their head office, obviously they've got a vested interest because they've got a plug-in hybrid that's vehicle to grid technology. But my understanding is their car park will gradually be filled up with these. So in periods they might be just running their building during the day on their fleet of cars sitting out there soaking up the sun.
That's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The other question for you is we've seen about chargers going offline. We've seen some chargers go offline.
Yeah.
What's your plans around that?
That's the horror story right now. And reliability, vandalising, and damage. So in the East Coast, there's been a lot of damage done by the floods. There's a lot of vandalism because these things are assets that are out by themselves. And part of it has been supply constraint for spare parts as well. Only on the weekend I was down at Franklin Street and three of the chargers were out and it had waiting for parts. So yeah, that's one of the things that we're looking to make sure that we've got managed as well as we can, and that is because we've gone for products that have got a fairly good reputation for durability. But it's like all of this hardware stuff, you put it out there, you can never be sure that it won't be vandalised and out of action for a while.
And, just for those that are considering fleet transition, if you're in a work environment and you've got your own parking areas and so on, like what we do at the university, you see a lot less of this damage to the equipment because it's a known population. You're kind of, there's a lot of people around. So you don't see the abuse or accidents quite as frequently. And so I think this is an issue for fleet operators. It's a lesser issue. For the public charging network, it's a challenge because you've effectively got an unattended asset out there. And so a variety of things can occur to it. But another thought too is, in my experience now driving an EV for more than a year, I charge at work, I charge at home, and only occasionally do I use the public assets. And I almost only use them because I'm out someplace far away and I need a public asset. And so they need to be dependable, but there's multiple solutions to get your car charged.
I think that's an important thing. History is showing us that 90% of the charging is being done at home or could be done in the office. So if you just take for a normal person, the average commute in Adelaide is 12 k's there and back, 24 k's. Most of the vehicles have got a range for 2, 3, 4, up to 600 k's. So for a lot of them, if your commute is just 24 k's, you can actually get away with one weekend charge. But the reality is, the habit is you just get into the habit of plugging it in. And when you only access the public stuff when you're away and think, okay, I actually need to top it up.
Okay, and that was the next question from somebody, which was for you, was what are we doing to educate drivers regarding charging etiquette? But we just talked about that then. So.
Well, there's more to charging etiquette. I mean, you do get, we've posted some signs about, please use this charger for 2 hours. I mean, you do get people kind of camp on a charger. And it is true that I find that I only need to charge once every 2 weeks or once every week and a half. I end up topping up and I do a short top up and then I, take my car off the charger.
Because you're leading by example.
Yeah, well, I mean, you try. I think, just really simple, a pragmatic thing. If you're buying chargers for a work environment, buy ones with long cords. Because the other thing you have is somebody will park, they'll finish charging, but they'll stay in the spot that is next to the charger.
Yeah.
So if you got a long enough cord, you run to the spot next to it.
That's the kind of practicality,
really
isn't it?
practical stuff. I mean, but we do have to learn a bit of charging etiquette. I mean, you have an asset that we have to share, especially in a workplace environment, and so we got to sort that out. But I think people are generally pretty good about it. I'm more worried about forgetfulness and people who, use a shared car but then don't plug it in.
Yep. So,
Charging networks are starting to look at alternatives, and that is that when your car is fully charged, it'll text you and say your car's fully charged. You've got 15 minutes to remove it. Otherwise, a parking fee starts to apply, and that starts to negate all of this energy savings you've got compared to petrol.
Yep.
So there's ways of managing that behaviour if you can't, get, compliance.
So for people listening today who are considering, they've got passenger vehicles and they're considering transitioning to EVs over the next year or 2 years or 3 years or however long, what would be your one piece of advice, each of you, to those fleet managers?
Well, maybe I'd start simple and deal with more complex stuff later. So find your easiest use case that you've got in your business. And so if it is just you've got a pull vehicle, something that gets used, but it's always back there. Maybe start with that one, get everybody used to it, understand the behavioural changes and that, and then move on to more complex ones. So if the next vehicle is a rep that has to be out all day, maybe start with them. And then if the next one is a rep that has to be out in the country, so just my advice would be start simple and learn, or you just jump in at the deep end.
I think it's great advice. The only thing I'd add is Don't worry about the economics, especially when you're in that starting stage. You're going to find out as you transition to EVs that there are some significant savings associated with them. The vehicle is going to cost you more upfront. You're going to have an investment in charging infrastructure. And then you're going to find out that you don't maintain that vehicle nearly as much and your fuel costs are way lower. And so, initially it could be some hand wringing. Oh my God, we got to buy charger infrastructure. It's terrible. Just jump in small, get it figured out. You'll start to, after you run these vehicles for a couple of years, you'll get the sense that, okay, this actually makes a lot of sense for a fleet operator. And I'm convinced that all fleets will move, and they'll move en masse before the rest of the populace does, because this does make really good economic sense. And these are very low maintenance vehicles.
And to make those economies work quicker, the state government still has the $3,000 EV incentive for vehicles that are under, I think it's under 70,000, below the luxury car tax. And I think businesses can still get 2 of those vehicles with subsidies as well. So it makes the business case even easier.
Yeah. Well, that's all we've got time for. We've run a minute over. So thank you both for coming in and sharing your knowledge. And thanks to everyone online for listening. If you want to find out more about Fleet Pledge, you can call Alex on the number on the screen, 0447 277 or you can go to fleetpledge.sa.gov.au and register your email address, and then you'll get updates and information as it comes to hand, and you'll also be invited to the next driver's seat. Thanks.